Howie Ponder with Poland News. We are doing a series entitled Poland and the U.S. Empire. Now, mainstream media loves to say that Russia invaded Crimea. Is this true?
No, of course not. What happened was basically what did happen in the Donbass was supposed to happen in Crimea. They already had scheduled what's called a friendship train. Basically, Ukrainian extremists coming to Crimea and igniting it there and creating a crisis that would justify, a crackdown. I mean, some of them were caught with slogans like "Crimea will be Ukrainian or empty." I think, if I translate it correctly. So what happened in Crimea? I think the Russian government, first of all, had troops legally stationed inside Crimea, and there was a cap on the number of troops that could be kept there, but not on the rotation or the type of troops. And basically, what happened? There was a mix of actions by local Crimeans. They were definitely supported. There was an operation by the Russian special forces to prevent that situation from exploding. They secured basically the key points and prevented the Ukrainian military from taking action, which was fairly easy for them considering that nobody was actually killed in anger during that operation. There was not much of resistance even from the Ukrainian military.
Right.
And they subsequently then organized a referendum, which obviously nobody in the West would recognize. But was there an invasion? I think when we think of an invasion, we have to say a foreign entity occupies a territory which occupies it by force. There was no resistance, meaningful resistance at least, more than symbolic on the Ukrainian part. The Russians were very much part of that. The Crimea historically was Russian. So I would not refer to that as an invasion. I just don't think it's the right word to use for it. Now, was it done according to international law? I know there's arguments about that. I happen to think it was in conformity with international law, the principle of self-determination, particularly considering that the Ukrainian constitution was already in tatters after the coup in Kiev. So when they say it was not done according to internal Ukrainian law, that's all very fine and well, but the regime in power in Kiev was not the legitimate power, the regime that should have been in power under Ukrainian law. So did these people have the right to protect themselves? I profoundly believe they did. And I think Russia helped them and protect them.
The mainstream media, as I say, is just ballistic when it comes to this. Again, just trumpeting Russia invaded Crimea. Now there's what I consider to be probably the best foreign policy television program in America, which is the McLaughlin Group. It used to be run by Dr. John McLaughlin, who passed away 2 years ago. But the show has been taken over by a fellow who writes for the Washington Examiner publication by the name of Tom Rogan. And I don't know if you saw his article. It was back in May, the middle of May. Russia just finished building the bridge to Crimea from Russia. And Tom Rogan, the journalist over at Washington Examiner, drew a lot of attention. He said that he wrote an article that America should help Ukraine bomb that bridge to destroy it. Did you happen to hear about that?
Yes, I did. I don't have TV at home. I don't read the corporate media. When something outrageous like that happens, I actually did read about that. Okay. I even posted about it on the blog. Yeah.
Okay, you did. Okay. Tell us also a little bit about the MH17 incident. That was when the jetliner flying over Ukraine during the war in 2014 was shot down. Of course, the Western media right away, before the dust settled, was already blaming Russia and Putin. What is your take on how that incident actually played out?
I think it was a carefully staged false flag, similar to what NATO did, for instance, using its secret army called Gladio in Italy. When the Communist Party was becoming influenced, they blew up the Bologna railway station with a lot of victims in order to create a shock. I think a similar thing happened in this case. I looked into the technicalities of that, and it is my belief that MH17 was shot down by Ukrainian Su-25, actually, which is not really suited for that kind of mission, but it's much easier to find than the few interceptors they had. I believed it was first engaged with air-to-air infrared guided missile and then finished off with cannon fire. And the purpose, I think, was pretty clear, is to accuse the Russians, understood here as being both Russia itself and what they call Russian separatists, which is, I think, a misnomer, for committing an atrocity. This is no different than the Rechak massacre, so-called Rechak massacre in Kosovo, or the Markali bombings in Bosnia, or, the so-called genocide in Srebrenica, or Colonel Gaddafi distributing condoms to his forces to rape people, or rape used as a weapon of genocide in Bosnia. It's all the same thing. It's basically, you create an incident, the most terrible one possible, and then you say, people disconnect their brain, you say, they're, Satan, that's a new Hitler, we need to stop them. And by implication, the side that you're backing becomes innocent, saintly victims that deserve our full support. I don't think there's much more to it. The notion that it was shut down by, first of all, the independent, the separatists in eastern Ukraine, I don't think they could do it technically. The notion that the Russians would have done it using actually Russian missiles is laughable and doesn't stand up to a technical scrutiny thereof. So we have it's a purely political, there never was an honest investigation into that, and it's just a way of demonizing further Russia. And it worked very well. Look at the reaction of the media and the consensus around sanctions after that.
Right. Okay, we'll move then over to a little time we have left is 1 year later, 2015. November, Turkey shoots down a Russian military jet over Syria during the Syria war, claiming that the jet violated Turkish airspace for 17 seconds, as ridiculous as that sounds. The attack happened shortly after Russia entered the Syria war. Now, Turkey is a NATO member. Did the empire plan this attack?
I think probably not. I think this was the case of internal elements in the Turkish military who wanted to trigger a confrontation with Russia. Erdogan made the same point. I think there are plenty of nationalists in Turkey who do want to create tensions with Russia, who are deeply involved. Turkey, the role of Turkey in the Syrian war, deserves a full hour by itself.
Right.
No, I don't think that it was planned by the empire, and the reason why I say that is because, first of all, it's fairly risky, potentially very dangerous, and secondly, Erdogan that flew in a panic immediately to get NATO support. I think he was kind of freaked out over what had happened. And there were risks. I mean, this was potentially a very dangerous situation, which I think Putin handled very intelligently. But no, I don't have any reasons. I never say never. I can't prove a negative, but I don't have any reasons to suspect that this was actually a deliberate action by the empire.
Okay, so just kind of a rogue Turkish event. And what's interesting is Turkey, because they seem to be playing both sides, jumping back and forth. First they attack Russia, then they're very friendly lately with Russia. Turkey seems to be a very interesting story, maybe one of the most unreported stories in foreign policy, as they are almost since the very beginning a member of NATO, but now we see them drifting away from NATO. I mean, Turkey is a very important member of NATO, but we see them wanting to buy weapons from the West. That's never happened. Cozying up to Russia. So, yeah, like you say, Turkey is a full hour in itself. But we only got a couple minutes left, and I still have a few questions. I guess I'll just go to this one here. You've mentioned him before, and that's the Polish-born Zbigniew Brzezinski, the former U.S. National Security Advisor in the Carter administration. Can you tell us about any role he may have had in creating modern Islamic terrorism when he armed and funded the Mujahideen in the 1970s?
Well, of course, yes. Basically, it's a well-known historical fact that the United States, and he played a crucial role in shaping that mindset. Basically, the brilliant idea, and I put brilliant in quotes here, was to unleash there's been for several centuries an extremist streak inside Islam. Islam by itself is a very diverse religion. It's not a monolith. But what the United States did is to federate all the, you could call them Wahhabis, it's not quite accurate. The term usually used is takfiri. Federate them all, fund them by the Saudis, arm them by the United States, organize them by the CIA, and unleash them on their enemies. First were the Soviets in Afghanistan. After that, we see that happening, with Iraq and the rest of the Middle East. After that, he played a crucial role in that. And there's another thing I would like to mention. He's not only played a crucial role in this, he actually, the other big myth, the first big myth that I mentioned to you is Hillary Clinton saying that Putin, quote unquote, is determined to rebuild the Soviet Empire, which is laughable. There's no constituency in Russia for that at all. Right. Brzezinski had another big thesis that was picked up and became mainstream, which is equally false, which is that Russia cannot be a superpower without Ukraine. He came up with that concept. And so it became, once this was accepted, it became almost a vital interest for the West and countries like Poland to prevent that from happening, which I think is a complete fallacy. I don't think Russia needs the Ukraine, and I think Russia is a superpower. We see it today. It doesn't need the Ukraine at all to be a superpower. So this man played a very toxic role, a very evil role. Intellectually, he shaped a lot of people who then became the key decision makers in the U.S. administration that followed him. So it's not only Carter, it's everybody after that.
Saker, thank you for being on Poland News.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.